Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to all of you joining us from the invite list that we can see from all corners of the globe. My name's Ian McKinney. I'll be hosting the webinar this afternoon, and I'm the Head of Sport and Active Lifestyles here at the University of Warwick. A personal passion for sport and exercise, but I'm joined by some esteemed colleagues who are going to give us their insights into, as the heading says, how sport can have social good across a range of areas and in their area of expertise. I'm joined this afternoon by one of our Team Warwick's performance sports scholars, Carrie Adenigan. Carrie was inspired to start wheelchair racing at the age of 11 after watching the London 2012 Paralympic Games, and just 4 years later became a Paralympic medalist, achieving a silver in the 100 metres and a bronze in the 400 metres and 800 metres in the T34 category. Representing Paralympic GB at the Rio 2016 Games, she also won 2 silver medals and at the Tokyo 2020 Games. An incredibly decorated athlete at such a young age, Carrie was named BBC Young Sports Personality of the Year in 2018, arguably the most prestigious sporting award available to young athletes in the UK. Off the track, Carrie advocates for inclusion for disabled people in sport at all levels and is passionate about promoting greater diversity in parasport. She also recently finished an undergraduate degree in history at Warwick. It's also been a real privilege to watch Carrie's journey with us at Warwick. And I think even more exciting than the progress she's made as an athlete and as a person over the last 3 years is actually what she could go on to achieve in the coming years. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Carrie this afternoon. Also joined by Dr. Vaughan Barricore, CEO and co-founder of Our Parks. Vaughan's going to tell us a little more about that movement. But he's a hugely successful CEO and founder of Our Parks, which provides free group exercise in parks and outdoor spaces, working in partnership with local authorities. He's built a brilliant non-executive director career over recent years, including roles with the Lawn Tennis Association, Active Surrey, British Olympic Foundation, and the British Universities and Colleges Sport. Former athlete from a council estate in Tower Hamlets, Vaughan found himself with no money to join a gym, but wanted to keep fit. Came up with the idea of creating an accessible pathway to exercise for people from lower incomes by working with councils and development agencies to offer free outdoor exercise classes to the public. Starting with the aim of getting just 500 people fit for free, he's grown the Our Parks to cover all of London and is now branching out to core cities and towns across the UK with over 1,000 coaches and over 250,000 parkers or participants. Robbie Chandler, another alumni from Warwick, is a health manager at Coventry City Football Club's charity arm, Sky Blues in the Community, and a member of Warwick's 5-year wellbeing strategy board. Having worked for the NHS after graduating, Robbie combined his passion for both health and sport by moving to Sky Blues in the Community team in 2020. He now leads a team delivering a range of community health interventions, including PE in primary schools, supporting older adults with cancer through fitness programs, and helping individuals who are at risk of involvement in crime. Alongside these initiatives, Robbie leads a truly inspirational program called Men Talk, which supports men with their mental health and well-being, which has recently been expanded across Coventry and Warwickshire. So welcome to all our panelists, delighted and happy that they're happy to give their time up this afternoon to engage in this seminar. I'm just going to come to Robbie first and just start, Robbie, with the first question to allow you to give us a bit more detail and introduction. So could you just run us through your own experience of sport, focusing on the positive impact it's had on your own life, but also where you've seen the impact it can have on bringing communities together and improving the health of others?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Ian. So sport's been a big factor in my life growing up, from kind of watching and personally engaging in sport, from team sports, playing football growing up and learning kind of attributes of leadership and kind of being with others and having that kind of serotonin, dopamine and everything positive that you get from sport. Kind of following my graduation in 2019, I branched out into working in mental health. So I worked for the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing team, IP328, and worked with clients with complex trauma, PTSD, major depression. Then went on to the North Warwickshire Learning Disability team, where I work with individuals with phobias, anxiety. Then the perinatal mental health team, working with postpartum psychosis, tocophobia, postnatal depression, and a stint on a psychiatric intensive care unit, which was kind of acute psychiatric support. And then following this, as you mentioned, Ian, I joined Sky Blues in the community in December 2020, essentially to deliver our program Mentalk. So this brings kind of sports and activities together with more targeted mental health support to engage and support the community using sport as a kind of forefront and leader as to what we're doing. So Mentalk brings individuals together on a weekly basis to engage in different activities, whether that be kind of table tennis, basketball, football, indoor archery, a plethora of different sports, and we kind of aim to co-produce it with the guys that come along. So if individuals want to have particular activities or do particular sports that we don't necessarily have, we go out and aim to facilitate that and get that equipment. So the sessions essentially bring people together to engage in activities, engage in sport, to get all of the structure, to get the routine, to get out, to get doing something and get kind of all of the positive things that sport can bring to us. And it also, what we find is it kind of brings us that locker room environment where sport can act as a facilitator for discussion and allow people to break down barriers and open up and perhaps talk about their problems in an environment that is non-clinical and isn't led by perhaps psychology or psychiatry and isn't that intimidating. So we offer workshops weekly. So we look at anxiety, depression, stress, self-compassion, and offer one-to-one support on our mentor sessions as well. And also at Sky Blues in the community, we deliver a sister project called Women Talk, which again aims to bring women together in a kind of warm environment where they can engage in sport and activities, get all the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphins from engaging in sport and activities and having some structure to their week and getting out and doing something. And we've also started an older adults project called Dementia Active, which again uses sport to bring individuals together to engage in perhaps activities that they previously lost touch with, and to allow them to kind of have that cognitive stimulation and support their balance and coordination. So we use sport at Sky Blues in the community for kind of our mental health projects, and it's central to what we do to support mental health.
That's amazing, and a real list of, I'm sure there's some phenomenal success stories in there, Robbie. Really interesting to hear your kind of progression from a really an environment where it's kind of acute, sharp end clinical care. What motivated you personally to move from that environment into one where you're kind of broadening your reach and working with a much bigger group of clients and individuals who could benefit from sport and exercise?
I think what it was is working in the NHS, there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons to it. And one thing that I was finding working in statutory services, especially kind of secondary care specialist services, was that we would often decline referrals for individuals that perhaps weren't complex or weren't serious enough. And you'd find that people would fall through gaps and that there were potentially services that weren't being offered to these individuals that would benefit them, and they would ended up being put on waiting lists for a number of years in many cases, where you would assess someone and then not see them for say 3 or 4 years. And joining Sky Blues and getting the funding for Mentor felt like almost the perfect opportunity to get on the ground and actually begin to support people and to not allow people to fall through gaps and offer something immediately, because sport and exercise has an immediate effect on our mental health and can have, I think, for up to 2 hours post kind of exercise, and it's a natural stress buffer. And kind of working in the NHS and working in that kind of acute environment didn't really facilitate offering those services, and it just felt like people were being left and not picked up and were kind of struggling alone. Whereas using sport and exercise through Sky Blues in the community allows us to have an impact immediately and support people and kind of offer something that means that they're not just sitting on a waiting list and not receiving any support.
That's amazing, and all high impact stuff. Are you, just to finish off, Robbie, are you able to give us an example of something that's just really made you smile? I'm sure you've got some phenomenal, positive, good news stories from the Mentor program, and I've admired it from our position at Warwick for a little while. But are you able to share something that's really made you smile or a positive impact on an individual?
Yeah, I mean, there's countless of kind of testimonies that we can say that, you know, our Mentor program has brought to people. I mean, we've had one gentleman that tried to take his own life around 18 months ago, and he's now completely off his antidepressant medication. He's started his own business. He's kind of re-engaged back into the community, and that was kind of coming initially to our online sessions and then to our physical sessions, and just playing football for an hour a week, and it got him out of the house, it got him doing something, it gave him structure, it gave him routine, and it gave him that opportunity to kind of discuss through what he was going through, where he had been, and where to go to next, and kind of generate ideas for himself and really move forward and kind of change his life. And it was kind of mental, was instrumental in supporting that gentleman to change his life and to kind of get better and get out of the depths of things. We had another gentleman that didn't leave the house for 8 years and then kind of came to our weekly activity sessions, and it was the first time he'd been able to play football for longer than 8 years because of his disabilities, and we were kind of open and inclusive and supported him in re-engaging with sport and being able to use that to better his mental health. And now he runs the sensory room at Coventry City Football Club and has kind of completely re-engaged the community and has battled his mental health problems through using sport and exercise in our mentor sessions.
Wow, and as you said, there are so many different testimonies. It's so difficult to kind of capture, but a really unbelievably powerful example there at an individual level, the positive impact that sport can have, and you're describing there the impact that they can also then go on to have, with other people. So it's not just their own development, but actually what often these individuals who are benefiting from programs are able to give back, and then that effort and return is multiplied, isn't it?
Yeah.
Harry, I'm going to come to you next, and just to go back to that original question, a very decorated history they went through at the start, and there's so much more energy and effort that sits behind that. But if you could also just run us through your own experience of sport, focusing on the positive impact it's had on your own life, but also where you've seen the impact that it can have on bringing communities together and improving the health of others.
Yeah, definitely. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me here on the call. So funnily enough, actually, my journey of sport began at Warwick pretty much. So after watching the London 2012 games, I started racing at Coventry Godiva Harriers, and then they actually do their training at the Warwick University track. And then fast forward, around 7 years later, and then I was applying to study at Warwick, and then got in from 2019. So it was just very much a full circle, moment with that. But in terms of like the good of sport, I think I've definitely seen sport really boost, my self-confidence, my self-esteem. Also, in terms of being a student athlete as well, there's so many benefits, in terms of increasing focus. And I think that's also really important, just to know that it's important to have that balance, especially in academia, to be able to have sport as an outlet, something that you can enjoy and have that benefit of doing sport, as we've spoken about, in terms of mental health, physical health, and just creating these inclusive communities where people can get involved in sport, because when I started sport, I never really mixed very much with other people with disabilities. I didn't have that opportunity to be around other people with disabilities. So once I started doing athletics, that was a great opportunity to socialize through sport. So it's not just about the physical, it's about the mental, and also about how it helps us to, connect with people. I think sport definitely brings us together. And it also links to that, that idea of sport for all, and how sport is really for everyone. Everyone can find a sport that they can do. And I think being a part of the Paralympic movement myself, I've seen how sport really does change people's lives, and everyone can do it pretty much. And even linking to the saying that I think Nike's got a slogan that says, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So really, like, nobody has an excuse. And I think that shows how sport can really help people, and how it is literally for everybody. And also on a personal level as well, I've definitely found, the benefit of having really good sports facilities, accessible sports facilities. That also links to my experience at Warwick with, the sports hub, for example, and the importance of access as well. When we do talk about sport being for social good, it's also important that sport is accessible for everybody, and knowing that everybody can do sport no matter what your ability is. It's great to have facilities like, the sports hub, where people, from different backgrounds, different abilities can get involved in sport. So yeah, I hope that really explains, how sport can really help us all, how it can, empower us all.
Thanks, Carrie. And I think it really pleased you mentioned the sports hub there. I was so fortunate as somebody who's worked at Warwick for 3 years now to arrive just after it was built. So I learned from colleagues lots of the challenges that come with the £49 million investment into sport and physical activity at the hub itself and around campus. So yeah, I think the university's commitment to sport and active lifestyles and to really generating a truly inclusive, active campus has really, taken great strides. And our biggest challenge now is the focus on building has shifted in our strategy from the physical building to how do we now build lots of those communities that you talked about to keep people as active as possible. I know we're talking about social good, and as a former professional athlete myself, I don't want to lose this opportunity. Just could you give people just a brief insight into what a normal week looked like when you were studying, training for the Paralympics, and completing your degree at Warwick? Because I think the level of commitment always is sometimes lost when they see you crossing the finish line or with the medal around your neck. So would you just be able to give us an insight into what that week looked like while you were studying your degree?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be honest, like final year was definitely very difficult, in terms of balancing it all. So I trained around 2-3 days a week on the track. I used the gym 1 or twice a week. So I was using like the Sports Hub gym. Also, when I was training for the Paralympics as well, I was using the swimming pool, and I've continued to do that because I think cross training is so important, because I think sometimes it's easy just to get stuck in your own sport. And I think even for your mental well-being, it's nice to try different types of sports and just have that diversity. So I was utilizing the swimming pool. Also in terms of contact hours, obviously I had like so many essays to write and stuff like that. But what I tend to do is I try and train either like really early in the morning, so before I start studying, or like in the evening to try and get it in. And I think I get asked a lot, how do you balance it all and how do you kind of like manage your time? And I think it's just like you said, it's just discipline really, and it's just about knowing what your goals are and what you want to achieve. And I think once you know what you want, you make sure that you schedule your time properly and get everything done.
Amazing. And I'm going to come to most of the questions in the Q&A, but just to update anybody who's just joined, if you do have questions for any of the panelists, we're going to come to most of these at the end. We'll have lots of time for people to ask questions once they've heard a bit more about our colleagues on the panel. But it seemed timely. We've got a question from Fiona in the Q&A that just said, how are you feeling about graduating soon and what's next for you?
I'm feeling really excited actually. I mean, I know I've achieved a lot in my sport, but I've been reflecting on this and thinking like, actually this is my proudest moment, finishing my degree, because it's honestly been a lot, but it's been a really great experience as well. And I think in terms of what's next, I'm not 100% sure. I have applied to do a master's, so I may well be staying at Warwick a bit longer because I don't really want to go just yet. So that would be really fun. And then also just carrying on with sport. I've got the Commonwealth Games coming up and I'm racing on the 2nd of August. So I'm so excited about that as well.
Superb, yeah. And just before we come to Bourne, finally, the opportunity that the Commonwealth Games and also other major events like International Children's Games that are taking place at the university this summer, really showcases the university's commitment, but also the benefit and the attraction of people coming to the region as we host some of these major events. And get to enjoy lots of the kind of local positive benefit that comes from being able to host some of them, which is not something that lots of other universities are able to do. So I'm going to come to Bourne next. Bourne, we've never had a chance to meet in person, but I've admired your work with Bucks as a Bucks member recently, and obviously as the team that I work with, being a contributor to the HE initiative, working in partnership with our parks. I'm sure there'll be other questions that either I'll have or panelists, but to come back to you with the original first question, if you could run us through your own experience of sport, focus on the positive impact it's had on your own life, but also where you've seen the impact it can have on bringing communities together and improving the health of others.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ian. Yeah, I mean, like when we talk about sport, and it's really dear to me because of how sport has impacted me to be the person I am today, and reached all the people that take part in the programs as part of the R Parks growth. When we look at the kind of the levels of sport, and there's so many different levels, we'll probably touch on a few of where it's the community, whether it's the coach, whether it's the volunteers. But for me, it really started as a kid on a council estate with not much to do, and a coach that saw us being bored, sitting on walls and doing stuff we shouldn't do, saying, come over to the track. And that's where, for many people, not even having to be elite, not even have to be competitive. It was just something that we got to do that allowed us to release and meet new people. So the first point on sport is it's that vehicle of one, reaching your potential, but two, creating communities within communities. So that this individual was really passionate about trying to see the best within anyone. So it doesn't matter if you're at a 10-star rating or you just come in fresh and clean and you just want to be part of a session. And then we started to understand, okay, as a community and as a person taking part in a session, we started to learn other life skills. So what does someone who doesn't live on my estate do? What is it like to go outside of London when I competed for English schools? And suddenly you start to learn all these life values and all this, let's say, prospect for you becoming an adult. So for me, it was an opportunity to meet new people, to learn coaching styles, but then also to expand my horizons further than my estate. And to some people that may not relate to them, but for many of us, we was on free school meals, single parent mothers, and we didn't really have any father figures. So within that sport, it created that coaching father figure that allowed us to almost self-fulfill what it's like to have a purpose to deliver or take part in activity. And then when we look at me as we go through my career and growing up, a lot of what I do now to reach as many people as possible. So our parks was founded in 2014. My idea was that I felt through having been able to be coached, I thought that everyone should have access to high quality exercise, no matter where they lived or how much money they had or what their ability was. And that was the kind of creation of our parks. And with our parks, what we decided to do was we would find coaches and give them what I felt was the magic in the bottle, which is those soft skills. So just being able to remember someone's name, say hi to them, adapt the session so you don't feel left out. And we started to see a shift in behavior of, let's say, participants, which we call parkers. A lot of people are inspired by sport, and sport is so inspiring, but a lot of people, when they get to sport, it doesn't meet their expectations because they're either asked to run or kick a ball or do something that they don't have the physical literacy or they're not comfortable doing, and there's no adaptation for them in that scenario. So what we strive to do at our parks is to make it as inclusive as we can, training those coaches, and then using that inclusive experience through it being free, through it being accessible for the communities to almost start to power their own growth by spreading the word and getting people to turn up and tone up, which is our slogan.
Amazing. And I think I introduced some of those statistics. You mentioned our park starting in 2014, and it's not that long since then, with a pandemic that will have disrupted some of the activity in between. Just talk us through a little bit more, if you could, on that journey from an aspiration to get 500 people fit for free to the position now where you've got over 250,000 parkers, as you described them.
Yeah. So our main objective now is in the next 5 years, we're looking to try and get 1 million people fit in exercising weekly. When we look at that journey from 0 to say 200,000, I remember standing in the park on the first session and no one turning up, and I remember it raining, and I'm thinking, am I doing the right thing? I've just remortgaged my house to try and do this. And that journey was a hard journey initially, because when you're doing something that at the time no one was doing, was making exercise free, paying the coaches to deliver, and using the data and the insight to present to national governing bodies and councils to say, if we get this population of people fit and active, we save X amount in the future of inactivity associated diseases. And that was new in those times. And then within that we didn't have let's say anyone that went in front of us to ask them, what do we do? How do we make it work? So we was always kind of, I say we were moving fast and breaking things. But what came out of it was 2012, again, talking about legacy. There was an appetite in London at the time to say, I want to be outside, I want to be doing stuff. I'm inspired by the games. And that sport hook was what we used to really inspire coaches and communities to take part and put on a show. Because when you do outdoor exercise classes, you're effectively putting on a show every time you have a group of people. And it's a show for the coach, and it's also a show for our participants, because there's no walls. Someone walking by can see, oh, she looks like me. Oh, he's a nice guy. I want to be in that session. And that's what we did. We put on mini shows throughout London, and we started to grow exponentially.
It's amazing. And I think for anybody attending today who has been to the Sports Hub, I think that kind of the design chimes with what you said, Vaughan, around the main spine and entry into the Sports Hub actually is there's no barriers, there's no swipe access. You can see about 80% of what's happening just by having a wander through. The number of students and public members who've taken up squash, because you can see the squash courts. They can see people that look like them, that move like them, that wear the same clothes as them, that have the same body type, same body shape. And it really does, just seeing that seems to have a really positive impact. I'm always curious, having seen the programme grow up in and around London and in the sport of basketball. I've so many teammates who've played on club and national teams who actually came from not a dissimilar background to yourself, and talk about a really positive journey. Sadly, a colleague at Brixton who had a similar role to lots of your coaches who's no longer with us, but so many players come through athletics club, basketball clubs, with that club providing some of the support that others are fortunate to have around them in their families. Do you think there's anything about London or Londoners that's a little bit different that made them take to this programme? Or actually, are you seeing, do you know what, nationally the demand is there, and the only limit to growth is just a little bit of time?
Yeah, I mean, London was a good test bed, because in London you're never a mile away from a park, so you have, it's densely populated, you've got all these green spaces, and at the time no one was really doing anything in the parks, as if they were, it was costing way too much money for anyone to access. So the idea was, okay, we can test this philosophy and see, is if you put a organized session, like we said, that one has a coach that understands those soft skills, two has that show element that shows everyone around them that it's safe, it's accessible, and it's for my community, we can start to grow this activity. And now we're proving in London, we are going to core cities, and the model's working exactly the same. You might have to tweak things slightly if you go to a quieter bit of like the UK, but effectively the same principles apply. It's, can we deliver safe physical and sport and physical activity in local parks, delivered by that community for us? Because the power of community and sport is, I always say, when communities are built on when two people have genuine concern for someone else, for each other's welfare. So you do that, and you can build communities, and they can continue to build.
And just thinking back, I'm always intrigued, because some amazing achievements there, and because the numbers are so high, just to try and bring that back down in the same way as they did with Robbie to an individual level. Back on that first morning when, I don't know whether the weather was good or not, and you're on your own, there's no one else there, at that early stage of the journey, is there a particular individual or impact that just kind of makes you smile and keeps reminding you why you keep doing what you're doing, even though we're talking about 250,000 people now?
Yeah, it's actually at that park. I remember meeting this lady, her name was Lucy, at the park, and she was the only one booked on, and she didn't turn up because she couldn't find me. And it was like, you just need to, you say meet me at the park, you just need a location, because at the time we was just moving fast and we didn't have a proper website. And us just putting a location and a bib, we used to wear these coach bibs, suddenly it was a revolution for us, because people could find us, and the numbers, it was 2, 3, 4, and then suddenly you turn around and there's like 60 people in the park waiting for you. You're like, wow, this is amazing. All thanks to a bit of advice from one of the parkers.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think sometimes on on the colder, darker days, or when there's challenges that each of you have faced. I think sometimes having that individual, whether it's a coach or somebody who've had a positive impact, certainly seems to drive lots of people. As an active sports coach now, I always think to the younger players in my basketball team as to, you know, where they were as people, where they were as individuals, not just as players 6, 12, 18 months ago. You know, and it's a boys' team, and I now see these players growing into, you know, incredible young men who have bright futures ahead of them from a whole range of backgrounds. I think sometimes the most exciting bit is actually what they did after that. I don't know where Lucy is now, or if is she a coach and a trustee of the charity, or is she just keeping fit and active and maintaining her health?
She is a coach. She became an our parts coach, and we call them Coach Parkers, and now she runs does her own PT session. So again, that's when you look at a full cycle of that story. She was an inactive lady, but inspired to train, then liked it so much she inspired other people's, and now that's what she does full time.
Wow, amazing! From almost such humble and small beginnings, each of our panelists there given some fantastic examples of the multiplier effect that engagement in sport and physical activity can have, not only on their own health, but what they give back to their local community. Robbie, I'm going to come to you next with just one of the pre-submitted questions that we had that said, how do you see other factors such as science and technology contributing to the role sport plays in society?
I think science and technology is massive for sport. I think one thing that we saw through our mentor program was we were kind of pushed to have to deliver things virtually. And so we were able to utilize kind of Teams and Zoom and technology to be able to still offer sessions and still offer support to individuals struggling with their mental health. And what we found was that technology was able to break down barriers and kind of facilitate individuals engaging that wouldn't necessarily have come out to leisure centres, that wouldn't have come along to the facilities and would have felt too overwhelmed, too anxious, and were struggling too much to kind of access support and services. So that kind of technology, being able to deliver things virtually, really broke down those barriers, and we were able to kind of literally deliver activity sessions over the internet, and it was kind of inclusive, not just for people kind of in Coventry, but for people further afield, and it supported kind of an increased engagement and again a kind of support, not just in kind of engaging sport, but supporting mental health.
It's amazing how resourceful and resilient people had to be through that time period. Carrie, we've seen lots of examples of how teams and athletes coped through that period of kind of no contact, and we were really delighted to be able to support you where we could, and England Athletics and government guidance allowed, which is phenomenal. I don't think I've said government guidance for 6 months, which seemed to be something we said almost hourly for the 18 months before that. You know, how resourceful, innovative did you have to be with your coaches, and what was your experience as an athlete through that time period where one-to-one contact was prohibited?
Yeah, it was a very strange time, and we really had to be extremely creative with training. So I'm not sure if I have mentioned this to Warwick, but what basically happened was, because I don't live too far from the university, I actually pushed on the road, you know, the car park of the hub. So I was literally just doing like sprints around there, which was quite useful. And then I did lots of indoor sessions, so similar to what Robbie said. We had Zoom sessions where we'd actually do roller trainings, we'd do indoor training and get to see each other. And I think that was really great to keep those connections. And even my coach would almost be the DJ and have music for us while we trained and stuff like that. So I think we really just had to be extremely resourceful and just adapt to the situation.
Which sounds similar, amazing, isn't it? Coming to you last of all, Born, how did you cope? Because I don't think your growth slowed at all. And if anything, maybe you saw a few more people engaged through that time period. How did you have to kind of pivot and adapt during that period of no contact, or our parks operating without access to any parks?
Yeah, we actually grew a huge amount during that part. We went online. We developed some online products. At the time, it was, when you looked at the market, we had everyone online, lots of people doing content, but we decided to go back to our nature, down to the other end of the scale, where it was so stripped back, where no one was servicing inactive individuals. Everyone was trying to do as many bird peas and make as many hit chest sessions as you could. So we developed a product called Couch to Fitness, funded by Sport England, in line with the NHS, and that for us, that was a product that really kind of resonated with inactive ethnically diverse communities, because it gave you a 9-week program that you could follow along to on demand at home, and it was free, obviously, because that's what we do. And we did see a massive shift, and even in our delivery today, online is definitely what we continue to do. But from a coaching perspective, we had live sessions. We still had hangouts with our coaches, so we still did a weekly Zoom meeting to hang out, because coaching is very lonely anyway when you're doing outdoor exercise classes. We moved them online, but for us it was more around the coaches' mental well-being, because you have to be in a good place to coach and to coach it effectively. So it worked twofold for us. It was really looking after our parkers and looking after our coaches' mental and physical well-being as well.
Amazing. And just coming back to you, I mentioned earlier on in the session the potential positive impact on major events and facilities, and Gary, we know, is looking forward to the Commonwealth Games themselves. But what impact do you think the Commonwealth Games could have on local communities within the West Midlands?
Well, I always say celebration. Everyone wants to celebrate something, and the great thing about the Commonwealth Games come to Birmingham is, now when you celebrate, you can celebrate as a community, whereas everyone, sun's out, they might have a barbecue, they might go to the park and have their little family celebrations. This type of celebration brings the whole community together, and it inspires them, because you will see Team GB doing what they do best in terms of going out there, putting their training and the hard work on the line to try and bring back those medals and inspire the community. So the impact that games have on local communities, what is the infrastructure that's been built, as long as and everything else, it really creates the next talent of the future to go out, and the coaches of the future and the Borns of the future. So I mean, yeah, I am so excited, and I know that just being and living in East London when 2012 was there, I know the impact it's going to have on so many people and individuals.
Yeah, it is amazing. I think we're at the university really excited, and now it's becoming very real with so few days left to go before the games actually start. But for anybody attending who's not aware, the university is going to be an athletes' village. So it's one of many. It's a very different model for a major games, to use multiple villages, and really positive engagement, I think, generally with the HE sector, using capacity, space and facilities that different universities in the region have. So you may have seen that University of Birmingham, a local partner, are actually a major partner within the games. At the University of Warwick, we'll see 1,900, as I said, athletes staying on campus. We're also a training venue for rugby sevens, wrestling and judo. So over 600 athletes will use the university. We've mentioned the sports hub and our outdoor pitches as their training base during the games. So yeah, sometimes I think, when we're sitting in meetings and I'm talking to colleagues about how we're going to build a sauna in the car park at the sports hub, how are we going to put a private changing area into the sports arena, we kind of get bogged down in some of the challenges with the games, but actually really quickly lift ourselves out and look at the breadth of athletes, the range of nations, and the good feeling that those games bring, not just to the university, but yeah, definitely to the region. I'm really excited for local athletes like yourself, Carrie, to be able to compete. The number of athletes post 2012 who talked about the literally once in a lifetime opportunity to compete at a major games and Olympic games, in not just in their own region but in their own country. How you must have put some thought, although I'm sure you're a very calm, collected athlete, you won't be getting too excited, but you must have put some thought as to what will that feel like when you're lining up at the athletic stadium with a home crowd, kind of willing every push and you on to medal success. Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, it's so exciting. I mean, I remember just being inspired by London 2012, as we've been talking about. So to have a home games of my own, but so close, being in the West Midlands as well, it's honestly so exciting. And I just hope to just enjoy it and make the most of it, because really I may not have an opportunity like that again, just to be so close to home, and just hopefully to make the Midlands, you know, proud.
Brilliant, thanks, Carrie. And just going to come back to you with one of the other pre-submitted questions. I don't think I said before we met, I don't think there's a wrong answer to this, but really interested in your thoughts. At what age do you think sport can positively impact children? And is there more that can be done to encourage children's participation in sport and physical activity?
I think from any age, really. Yeah, I don't know if there's a wrong answer. I think from very young, I mean, we see even like toddlers learning how to swim as early as possible, and that just shows the importance of sport, you know, as an example. So I think it's really important for everyone of any age. And I think in terms of the thing that we could do more of, I think in terms of the disability space, it's really important. You know, I remember when I was young, I was excluded from sport a lot at school. Unfortunately, because of health and safety reasons, my school didn't know how to actually include me in sport. So when I found out about para sport, it was a bit confusing, because I was like, what? I didn't realize that I could do sport. I didn't realize sport was for me. So I think, especially when we're talking about young children, it's important that young disabled children realize that sport is from them from an early age. They don't have to wait until they see a Paralympic Games, you know, to realize that.
Oh, fantastic. And in terms of inclusivity, Robbie, you talked about a number of challenges. Is there anything in particular you feel through the mentor or the other programs that you're running that you've really focused on to increase the breadth and reach of your programs? Essentially
just making sure that our venues kind of can facilitate allowing everyone that would potentially want to come along, but also to increase inclusivity. We've offered online sessions for those that perhaps need that kind of easy way in and need that kind of online support before coming to physical sessions, and they can also kind of find out about the activities and kind of get to talk to us before coming along. We also offer a number of different activities that can kind of cater for everyone, so it's not necessarily just, I think people see our football badge and hear Sky Blues in the community and assume it's going to be quite an intense game of 11-a-side football, but we offer things like indoor archery, Jenga, quoits, darts, a load of different activities that can kind of cater for everyone. Brilliant. And I've got another question coming back to you, Robbie, for just to remind anybody who has joined us slightly later, if you have got a question for any of the panel, please pop that into the Q&A section. We've got one that's come in from Bob. Bob's saying hello, and he's the club and facilities manager at World Snooker, and we're proud to say a Warwick alumnus. So a question for you, Robbie. Have you got any advice on how they might be able to engage in the health sector, GP referral systems and so on, to raise awareness of the health benefits of playing snooker and signposting people into their clubs and their sports? Okay, hi Bob. Yeah, so in terms of, I suppose I can talk about what we did, is that we tapped into our local CCG and kind of told them about what we're doing and the health benefits and kind of everything that demonstrate the efficacy of the program. And I imagine with snooker, there's loads of benefits that you get in terms of mindfulness, focusing on breathing, and kind of having that headspace. So my advice would be to talk to the CCGs, and there's always, so we're on something called the GP Gateway, which is what GPs look up when they're potentially referring individuals to social activities or to things to engage in, and they can kind of click down and see a list of activities in their area, whether that's sports, whether that's kind of mindfulness courses. So the GP Gateway would definitely be something to tap into, but also a fantastic resource that a lot of GP surgeries across the country are now utilising is social prescribers and social prescribing link workers, who are essentially always looking for new things in the community, activity based, to refer individuals along to that are struggling or that are in need of kind of social activities or things to engage with. So definitely kind of tapping up your local CCG, GP Gateway or social prescribers, I'd suggest. Great, thanks, and good advice. I'm just going to stay with you for a second because we've got a quick question from Susan, who first of all passed on some positive feedback, said congratulations on establishing such a valuable programme to support mental health through sport. Her question was, are you aware of similar programmes to Sky Blues in the community in other areas of the country? Well, every football club, I think there's 92 football league clubs. They all have their own kind of community scheme attached to them. It really depends on what each individual community scheme wants to focus on. So there's no kind of set structure or curriculum to say that you must do certain work in certain areas. One club that definitely are kind of, I suppose, the forerunner in kind of supporting mental health is Everton. I'm aware that they do a lot and have a lot of programs for individuals with mental health problems. But I think at Sky Blues in the community, we're quite unique in that we're offering kind of sport and activities, but also offering targeted mental health interventions. So with my background in psychology, we offer kind of CBT, compassion focused therapy. So I think we are one of, if not the only club at the moment in the UK that is delivering that kind of targeted session and therapeutic intervention. Whereas I think a lot of the clubs across the country perhaps offer sessions for individuals with mental health problems. So they may run football sessions or different types of sessions, but don't necessarily have that targeted psychological support bolted onto it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robbie. I hope that picks up your question, Susan. I'm going to come to Bourne next. I haven't got a name for this, so apologies, I can't give credit to the questions, but really, really insightful in terms of what our audience are thinking about at the moment. So there's two in there, if we could, Bourne. What support, you mentioned linking with Sport England, but more broadly, what support would you like to see from policymakers to promote sport at grassroots level? And also, secondly, have you got any advice for how people who might not be naturally sporty can use sport for social good?
Yeah, thanks. So when we look at policy level, I think physical literacy is one of the biggest things that I see in terms of because we do, not only do we do sport and physical activity in parks, but we also do it in schools as well. So one of our new ventures is that we do lots of these summer camps. So when we look at it, we look at school PE, and we look at holiday clubs, I feel like as a individual, I know growing up, going to my holiday club and having access for free meant that I didn't stay in the house with no garden. So if we look at policy, we can look at how can we ensure that all these holiday clubs that are happening at the moment continue, and there is a physical activity element that links to sport. So let's work on every individual's and making it inclusive again. So no one should be left out. Everyone should be able to take part in the program. But whether it's working on your running, jumping, catching, throwing, but making that policy that in primary schools and not term time and outside of term time, we have so much space. I know schools as an opportunity that is closed off to the community. So how can we get those spaces opened up, get them activated, and make it part and parcel of what we do year in, year out? And that will immediately help against the fight against inactivity and get more people enjoying sport, because they have those movement skills developed through their childhood. So that's one thing. And what was the other question, Ian?
The second, the two, sorry, they're jumping around.
I think it was around funding, wasn't it?
Yeah. What sport would you like to see from policymakers to promote sport at grassroots level?
Okay, so that was the kind of support around physical literacy, and then I think the other question was around.
And any advice for people who might not be naturally sporty to use sport for social good? Yeah,
again, so when we do a lot of family fit sessions at the moment, and what we've realized is, as a family, we have lots of parents that aren't confident in going outside to the park and kicking and throwing a ball or running with their kids. So what we did with the family fit session was we disguised play with physical activity and sport. We even did a series called Superhero Fitness, which was, we got the kids out pretending to be their favorite superhero and link the exercise and movement with whether it was doing Spider-Man crawls or whatever it was, linked to their favorite superhero. So tips would be how getting the family and educating them in a way where it isn't come down and do a hard hit workout and run around the park. is actually how can we make it fun and inclusive, and then add in those soft skills of the meet and greet, the exercise designed as play, and suddenly we can then start to branch them out into actual games. So what we did is you start there, and then by week 9 you're actually playing invisible tag or something like that, and everyone's running around and doing what they didn't think they would be doing at the beginning of the journey.
Fantastic, and some great advice, I think, hopefully to motivate and show the breadth of impact that it can have. These activities definitely aren't just for sporty people. They're about as inclusive as they get, and as you said at the beginning, free to access. Carrie, I'm going to come to you next. We've got a question from Adrienne. I hope I've got that pronunciation correct, Adrienne. So you were at Warwick a few years ago and have played basketball since you were very young, including at Warwick. You've now got 2 daughters, struggling to find a basketball club, which breaks my heart as somebody whose passion is basketball. I hate to see people who want to play not have the opportunity. But you've struggled to find a basketball club for them. So you did your coaching certificate, started coaching girls about 5 years ago. So the question, Carrie, is given the number of teenage girls who drop out of sport from the ages of 14 plus, what are your thoughts and advice on encouraging girls in sport and their approach to coaching them?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Definitely something that I've been thinking about quite a bit with that there's a women's sports trust, and this is a lot of the work that they do, for example. And I think when we think about this question, I think visibility is really important, and being able to have role models, I think that really helps. So I guess in basketball, I'm sure there's so many amazing, female role models out there. And I think that really encourages, young people, especially to see someone who looks like them, for example, someone who they can relate to on different levels. I think that can definitely help to encourage girls to realize that sport is for them and to see themselves and see their place in sport. I think in coaching as well, there definitely needs to be more education around the needs of girls and women. And I know there's a lot of work going into that as well, in terms of knowing, how's best to communicate with girls, what are their needs personally, and things that, for example, may relate just to girls, and the way that they train, and, knowing, I guess, in terms of what kind of coaching they need, but what kind of training they need, and that. So I guess it's about facilitating things and making sure that things are catered towards girls, and I hope that will encourage them to get involved.
Brilliant, and that theme has run through a number of our responses this afternoon, isn't it? The importance of role models and the visibility. I think the phrase you used at Bourne was, when you see people like you doing activity, that does inspire people to get involved. I think just staying on a similar theme, Carrie, coming back to you, and we got a question from Tom, who it looks like is one of our Olympian alumnus. If that's the same Tom Hall as was at the last Olympic Games, Tom, welcome. If it's a different Tom Hall, then you have the same name as a Team Warwick scholar who was at the last Olympic Games. So apologies if it's not you. But Tom's question: how important do you think competition at all levels is, right through from grassroots to elite? How important do you think that is to attracting and keeping people in sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. I think when we talk about like grassroots, a lot of the competitions, for example, that I have are grassroots, and it's about national level. And that is really important in terms of keeping people in the sport. And an example I can give you is the fact that, for example, when I have national events, even at the Coventry track, at the Warwick track, you've got Paralympians racing with people who have just started sport, for example. And I think that can really encourage young people when they're actually training and competing against people who they've seen, on TV, or those at the highest level. And that's why it's so important that we invest into those competitions, because that's definitely a great opportunity for people to, find out about sport, build, their profile, but also just to be able to mix with others. And just, again, like I've spoken about before, having that community of athletes from grassroots level to national and international level.
Brilliant. And I think coming back to you, Robbie, you mentioned the power of the football club in engaging people in programs. How important and valuable do you think that is for communities? Is that what attracts people in, or is it the programs themselves?
I think it's a mixture. I think it's a mixture of both. I think in particular in Coventry, we can kind of champion the football club, and it's got a massive place in the heart of the community, and that kind of naturally draws people to us. In particular, men who may not kind of go to a psychologist or go to a psychiatrist or engage in different activities that are on show, but if their football club says that they're putting something on and it kind of gets them through that channel, we see an increased engagement. Whereas kind of, especially through Men Talk, Women Talk, Dementia Active, once we can kind of demonstrate the efficacy of the program and demonstrate what we're doing and how much of an impact it has for these individuals that have come through us because we're a football club, we can then start to get the word out and snowball and get word of mouth and get individuals that kind of come along and engage and get benefit in the community through hearing about it, and not just because kind of we're a big community scheme in Coventry.
Brilliant. And it always feels, we said before we came on, didn't we, we never have long enough. And I think we're probably just scratching the surface of what we could talk about in terms of sports for social good. But I've just got one last question, if I could come to each of you. I don't have a name, but one of the questions from one of our attendees today, if you could pick one thing coming to you, Bourne, first, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned from championing sport for social good?
The amplification of doing a good act and what sport has, it's almost a chain of events. You do something good, you champion it, and the impact that has on that individual can go on, and it continues to thrive and go as long as we continue to champion it and celebrate and being inspired by the fantastic athletes as well.
Superb. And coming to you, Carrie, with the same question as we start to move towards the end of the session, what do you think is the most valuable lesson you've learned from championing sport for social good?
I think it comes down to sport being, a celebration of what we can do. And we see that, in the communities and socially, just celebrating the possibilities, celebrating our abilities.
Fantastic. And Robbie, coming to you last, the most valuable lesson you've learned from championing sport for social good?
I think definitely how much sport has the ability to open doors and start to facilitate conversations that wouldn't necessarily be had in other environments. And sport is a real leveler. And people may not necessarily talk about their mental health problems or what things are affected by, but they'll always have an opinion on the Messi-Ronaldo debate or have an opinion on sport. And that can be the perfect place to start to facilitate conversations and ease into some of those more difficult topics. And I think sport really kind of pushes that and facilitates that.
Superb, amazing, Robbie. And as I said, time always beats us in these discussions, but it just leaves me to, if I could summarize really briefly, we've heard a few words a number of times today, but I think the most telling one for me was, it started with yourself, Bourne, but has come out in other answers, the opportunity to celebrate. I think today has been an opportunity to celebrate from impact on others around them, from the impact of the Our Parks programme, Carrie's excitement at lining up on the start line and actually potentially becoming a role model in the same way that she was watching other athletes at London 2012, that we may be interviewing another Warwick alumni in 8 years' time whose journey started on the back of your participation in the games. And Robbie, locally as an admirer of not just the Men Talk programme, but all the positive work that community foundations do at football clubs and how they use the badge of the football club to have positive good and use sport for social good. I think some really valuable lessons that have come through today. At the university, we're really proud to have invested in our facilities, but as I said, not just to focus on the physical buildings, but now really push on our agenda to build the most active campus community in the UK, both within the university, and keep championing the impact that we can have as part of the university strategy, both locally, regionally and nationally. Just as a final huge thank you to colleagues at the university who've supported this session, provided us with lots of information and giving every information we can. There's some details on your screen as to how you might be able to follow up following today's session. For anybody who have additional questions, we've also always need to leave with an apology that we haven't managed to get to all the questions, which is great that we've seen phenomenal engagement. So if we haven't got to your question, please apologise on the university and my behalf, but we have got through as many as possible. So the panelists, phenomenal, thank you for that insight. And from Vaughan Barrick, anybody interested in further information, Our Parks has a great web presence. Robbie Chandler, Sky Blues in the community, will tell you a lot more about his phenomenal work. And Carrie, your social media profile is growing and growing weekly. So some amazing information of both about your achievements, but also an insight into what challenges and what you're looking forward to competition-wise over the coming weeks and months as we look to welcome the Commonwealth Games to the region. There is a feedback form within the chat. If you would like to provide any feedback, we'd always welcome that as we look to host other events. Thank you to everybody involved, and for those who've attended, for your time this afternoon. I hope you found it as insightful a session as I have, and that you've enjoyed attending today. Thank you very much, everybody.